So there you have it. Even Floch won, Owen Turtenwald won, and basically all Even Floch got to do was play some very pretty lands, and it was Owen Turtenwald doing all the card drawing. Card drawing is good, boys and girls.
What does an opening hand for Even look like that is able to win after sideboard?
He basically wants Divination. That's one of his better cards. Syncopate, I wouldn't be surprised if Syncopates came back in. They're just a lot more effective on the play. And, you know, he wants to be able to hit his land drops for, again, every single turn. So I think something like 4 land, Divination, and a counterspell or 2 would be a great hand. A Last Breath to kill a Pack Rat. He's very vulnerable to the, you know, the turn on Thoughtseize turn 2 Pack Rat. And here we see the Syncopates coming back in, actually. Or, you know, we have an overhead camera view as well. And, yeah, Syncopate does get a lot better when you're the one who's laying lands first. So Even's opening hands are a lot less dynamic than Owen's. Owen's, you know, are like Thoughtseize into Pack Rat, Thoughtseizing into Connection, Duress or whatever. Even's just like, I hope nothing happens. I hope it gets to turn 5 and there's nothing on the board.
But even a hand of Thoughtseize, Duress that doesn't have, you know, a huge follow-up from Owen is pretty devastating against Even.
Yeah, I think that Even is looking at, you know, getting disrupted basically once or twice a turn, you know, in the first 5 turns or so.
Well, it's all been about card draw so far. In Game 1, it was about the Divinations and Sphinx's Revelations of Even Floch, but Game 2 was all about the card draw of this card from Owen Turtenwald, Underworld Connections, the Enchantment, the rare from Return to Ravnica, and as you can see, Phyrexian Arena, that was such a lovely, lovely card. Can see why Underworld Connections so popular. 29 Grand Prix Top 8 decks. That's done its work for the pro community, it's fair to say. And, of course, a reliable source of devotion because it has 2 black mana in its symbols, making it a crucial component of mono-black devotion decks.
It's funny. I feel like people maybe even almost started playing it because they were looking for cards with black pips.
Yeah, I think that, you know, once we saw the aftermath of Pro Tour Dublin, where we saw, you know, Mono Blue Devotion in the finals, both, you know, on both sides, people were like, oh, Devotion, that's a good thing. We should look for cards that power Devotion. And this is a pretty devastating way to do that.
Yeah, and then, you know, Pack Rat came out of that event also. You know, we saw Yamamoto playing Pack Rat in the deck. And then, you know, it didn't take long. In fact, Owen, like a week later, pretty much, was, you know, powering up his rats with Underworld Connections.
Yeah, we actually saw Brian Branduin win Grand Prix Nashville with... With you know, mono black, just you know, Underworld Connections.
Right, 1 week later, and then it was like I guess 2 weeks later that Owen's on that deck as well
in Albuquerque. Yeah.
One other thing there, we noticed in the last quarterfinal that William Jensen had Underworld Connections, but was really running out of life. Flavor on Underworld Connections. If you're looking for it, it's available. The question is how much you're willing to pay in this matchup. Owen can pay as much as he likes because life is a complete resource for him. For, you know, he is never going to be sitting at 3 going, dare I go to 2 and go into shock range or whatever. So if he can get it down, absolutely huge. As we see Owen shuffling up the CFB sleeves there. And there you see him, the former player of the year. And now your World Magic Cup captain for Team USA. Luis, will you manage to get to any of the WMCQs?
As of now, I'm not planning on going to any. Unfortunately, the one that Channel Fireball is running overlaps with a camping trip I had planned. So I will not be captaining from that perspective. But I haven't actually looked at what my schedule looks like a little further out. So there's a chance I make it to one of them.
Now, you've actually qualified through the WMCQ in the past.
Yeah, I won the one in Oakland 2 years ago. Actually beat Tom Martell and Shahar Shenhar, who then became the captain of the Israeli team the year after. But that aside, yes, I was able to play on the team with Brian Kilber, Joe Pinocchio, and Alex Bynek. Which we had a good finish. We finished in the top 16. You can see Kilber getting bonfired out all over the internet.
You could see me walking away from the table.
That is
in the
a great little gift, you know.
Like,
Yes. So Even Floch is looking at his 7 for what will be the deciding game of our first semi-final here at Pro Tour Magic 2015. We see a Sphinx's Revelation, a Jace, we see a Divination, some lands. Looks like he's going to keep.
That sounds close to the hand you described as being very good for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's not looking for anything particularly special, but...
So away we go for game number 3, and it will be Floch on the play. He opens up with Guildgate. And turn 1 Duress. What do we see?
Take it apart.
We know that there's Planeswalker, the Rev, Divination +3.
There's just divination, divination, and divination, basically.
Yeah.
Do you take the first divination?
It's really going to depend on what Owen's follow-up is here, since taking the divination is attractive because it's, the cheapest option and it'll come out on turn 3, but Jace is more powerful and more annoying, so if Owen doesn't have a good way to answer that, he might just take the Jace. And if Owen thinks he's not really going to put enough pressure on it, the Rev might actually be the pick, though I would be surprised if Owen didn't anticipate having a follow-up Duress or Thoughtseize before Rev came out.
I see that he does have an Underworld Connections in hand there.
Yeah, Owen's hand looks pretty good, too. Any hand with Underworld Connections and Duress is already pretty good.
So Jace will go away. We go to turn 2 for Even Floch. He's drawn Planar Cleansing, which one day, quite a long way in the future, may turn out to be good. Blood Baron of Viscopa.
And things are pretty much rolling the way Even wants them to. Nothing's happening yet. He knows that Underworld Connections is coming out, or at least assumes that, but he doesn't have a counterspell, so he might as well cast Divination.
19.
Down to 19. And
Owen drawing a life
Here
band
we
has
go.
changed his plan.
so let's have another look.
It's been amazing to me how good Lifebane Zombie has turned out to be against decks where it can virtually never take anything out of someone's hand.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity cost of playing Lifebane Zombie is just very low. It's a 3-1 unblockable in, the fail case, and
Right.
that's still quite good.
Yeah, it's a card that you marked out for us earlier in the weekend BDM before we came in the preview. Said, look, I think this is going to be very good. But as you say, the fact that sometimes it's been blank and it's still been good is interesting.
Well, and the card, even when it's not being played, exerts tremendous pressure on the format, right? I mean, it certainly constrains maybe some of the deck ideas you might have. You're like, oh, well, they have Thoughtseize and Lifebane Zombie. What happens to me?
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the reasons that Kibler has not had his most thrilling years that, the decks he likes to play are really, really negatively impacted by Lifebane Zombie, and I, for one, know he's going to be very happy when it rotates out.
Which happens in October.
Yep, the next Pro Tour will not feature any Lifebane Zombies, barring a very odd reprint in Cons of Tarkir, which I would be incredibly surprised to see.
Right. No pack rats, no Lifebane Zombies, no Underworld Connections.
No Sphinx's Revelations.
No Sphinx's Revelations.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think that a rotation is going to be pretty great.
And also, we've been in a rotation currently where, because Devotion has been such a big thing over the last year, that's very much about mono as far as possible in terms of colours. And of course, Khans of Tarkir, we now know, is very much not only about gold cards, but about wedges of enemy colour. So you're going to see an awful lot of powerful cards taking you a long way away from mono.
Yeah, so Owen has some interesting decisions here. He knows about Planar Cleansing, or he doesn't know about Planar Cleansing. He knows it's in, Even's deck, and he doesn't want to overcommit to it. But because Even drew an Azorius Charm, Owen is a lot happier just, playing more cards out.
It's Desecration Demon up next. Even at the end of turn, will cycle Quicken.
The old Quicken into Quicken.
Yeah, and he's quickly going nowhere with that. Desecration Demon hits pretty hard. I would expect Even to play a Scryland here and likely be looking at casting Planar Cleansing the next turn. Owen gets a hit in for 6, but because Planar Cleansing kills everything, it means that Owen doesn't really want to cast another creature right now, or even Underworld Connections. Basically, the blue-white deck is forced to deal with every one of Owen's threats already, so adding 2 to the board is not usually what you want to do.
We see that Owen's also drawn a Blood Baron of Viscopa.
So Owen taking the opportunity because he's not, likely to be casting a whole lot here. He could cast a Lifebane, but he's certainly not casting Underworld Connections. He's willing to just get in for 8 and then make Even tap out next turn, and then next turn play some more threats.
Cards. 5.
So Owen Turtenwald, the number 5 ranked player in the world, he could go a lot higher over the next couple of hours. Jeremy Desani, of course, will be your new number 1 ranked player next week because he is the player of the year.
So Owen chooses to just not play anything this turn.
Yeah, and Even decides not to cast Quicken. He might be setting up Planar Cleansing Quicken, but I'd be really surprised if he could just take 8 here. I think taking 8 this next turn puts him so close to just Mutavault range that he may want to play a land and a Planar Cleansing. He could rev for 3. That is also a pretty viable alternative, especially because of Quickens. Owen might not attack with Mutavault out of fear of Supreme Verdict.
Right.
So getting hit down to 6 by Demon and then casting rev for 3 is pretty good. So I actually kind of like just playing land, saying go, letting Owen hit you for 6, and then doing nothing. And then if Owen plays another threat, it gets Planar Cleansing. And then it sets up potentially a Quicken Planar Cleansing the turn after. But Even's played through the situation so many times that I'd be willing to go with whatever he settles with here. Mutavault showing why the monocolor decks are so good. That's another card which will relieve some of the pressures when it's gone. Right now, the pressure is to play a monocolor deck because you do get to play Mutavaults, and Mutavault's just an amazing threat. Multicolor decks just don't get to play as many Mutavaults or even at all, depending on what the colored symbols look like in your deck.
Nope, he just decides, let's get rid of that demon right now. I don't want to risk a duress.
Yeah, duress would be quite bad for Even there. And Owen missing a land drop now, so Owen, he can play something, but it's not going to be quite as good as a rev. I kind of like just playing a threat here. I think Owen has kind of held off on Underworld Connections every time so far in favor of playing Lifebane and favor of playing Demon. I think Underworld Connections just does not outrace Sphinx's Revelation, so playing cards that can attack Even's life total do end up, being the most effective. So the debate here is really Blood Baron or Underworld Connections. You could also play Lifebane and hit for 3 or hit for 2 with the Mutavault, but I think in general having Blood Baron in play is enough better, especially since it's the more mana-intensive play. Setting up a turn later where you can cast Lifebane and another spell in the same turn.
How much unknown information is in Even's hand right now that he decides to go with Underworld Connections?
And he's actually looking for a duress most of all, but if he misses on duress, a land drop is fine. And Temple of Silence is actually a pretty good draw for Owen. Even really wants to draw an untapped land here to cast a rev for 4, though.
Cool.
Leaves it on top. So Floch knows that something...
There's your untapped land.
Yeah, though he does have a dissolve. He could be willing to try to take another turn. The problem is if Owen goes duress, Even's kind of forced to dissolve it, and then Even basically cast a 3-drop instead of casting a 7-drop, which is pretty rough. Though Even has been reluctant to cast revs for anything less than 10 so far. So it looks like he's on
That's what he's doing.
He's on the rev
plays
next
the
turn
Skyland.
playing.
Patience all the way from Even Floch.
You can hear a little bit of the anticipation in the crowd.
17.
And Owen keeping Thoughtseize on top, I mean, he kept it so fast that my guess is that it was a duress or Thoughtseize, and it ended up being a Thoughtseize, just because that's just by far the best card he could have in the situation.
So here it is.
And that has to get dissolved here.
Yeah, given the way Even played this last turn, I would expect Dissolve to come out. I mean, he could cast Rev for 3, but that does not seem as enticing as just casting a Dissolve. And then assuming the Rev will buy you a turn of whatever, of safety from whatever threat Owen plays, which will likely end up being Blood Baron here. Though again, he could still. Well, Mutavault attack for 2 is less good into a potentially open Last Breath mana.
Floch took no time at all to leave the top card right there.
Yeah, he had scryed it last turn at the Temple, and
Yeah.
the situation had not changed enough.
So there is Blood Baron of Vizkopa.
Cool.
And we go back to Even Floch. He's up to 7 mana. We know he can get to 8. There's a Supreme Verdict that he's just drawn. He passes again.
And he's not looking at casting Quicken because he wants to combo Supreme Verdict.
16.
Yep.
Owen at 16 now.
Floch 12. Turtenwald 16.
And Owen's got a couple options here. He can hit with the Blood Baron. He can hit with some number of Mutavaults. Quicken, if he's hitting with his Mutavaults, this Quicken is just going to kind of destroy him.
Yes, he is.
Oh, here we go. Quicken from Floch.
And that does not look like a speculative
Draw.
Quicken.
Verdict.
Oh, Floch just... Well, that was way too hasty, I think. I think Floch actually wanted to cast Planar Cleansing there. He would have killed the Underworld Connections as well. So, I think he was
Wow.
kind of locked into his plan
Right.
and just, ran it out.
He drew the flock. The flock.
cleansing. Yeah, he was
drew the
locked into his
cleansing.
plan. He drew the cleansing and just immediately snapped off the Supreme
And now
Verdict.
he might have to just cast the cleansing here.
Yeah, and I think casting the cleansing here is very reasonable, but Owen's follow-up Elspeth would actually be pretty good. At this point, I actually kind of like just casting a Rev for 5. You hit a land drop, you end up setting yourself up a lot better.
17. Floch 17.
So let's see if we can what those 5 cards, the reset button for Floch, going to turn out to be.
The chat's completely right, by the way. Planar Cleansing doesn't kill Mutavault, so he had to cast Supreme
Oh,
Verdict.
sure. There you go. Yeah,
That worked out much better for him.
15.
So, and that rev for 5 was pretty good. It hit into an elixir and a couple of Azorius charms and a Jace. So no second Sphinx's Revelation, but Floch's not going to need it quite yet.
Yeah.
This Planar Cleansing is going to be pretty good, though. Owen wants to get it out of Floch's hand so he can play Elspeth.
So he's playing the Underworld Connections to sort of force Ivan's hand as far as the planar cleansing.
Owen can't afford to slow play anymore. I mean, he's losing the game to giant revs at this point. Revs outrace connections just so quickly that he's got to just try to get Elspeth out and try to end the game. It's going to be difficult, but even cycling the second connections just kind of makes Floch really, really eager to use that planar cleansing.
Right.
Even more eager than we were, but this time, correctly.
Were you surprised that Owen attacked 2 Mutavaults in there, or does he just not have a choice?
It's tough because he knows that Rev's coming, so he can't really afford to take his time. When you have more information about their hand and you've made the game fast enough that Ivan's constricted on mana, that's different. But in this sort of game, you really can't afford to be patient. You just have to go for it.
And then you see him
See,
planar cleansing and then tap the last mana to play the elixir.
dear Lord, that turn was brutal. Oh, here's a divination. I'm up a card. Here's a planar cleansing. That was 3 for 1. Oh, now here's an elixir. Thanks. Your turn.
Oh, here comes Elspeth, though.
Mm-hmm.
And so Floch doesn't have the revelation to seal the deal here. And Elspeth is a pretty fast clock, but it's still looking, I think, decent, especially since Jace does do a number on Elspeth. You've got all the tokens become 0/1s into the Jace Plus.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. My turn. Yep.
But Owen does have a plan. Let's see what Even can do. Elixir, of course, will gain 5, and that's what he's going to do right now.
He's doing that actually during his upkeep.
Yeah, he wants to increase the chances of basically drawing Revelation, though he wouldn't be unhappy with a planar cleansing right now.
There you see the 2 players. No sign from their demeanor who's ahead or behind.
I think Owen is feeling like he's pretty heavily disadvantaged here. He's got nothing else in his hand besides a Bile Blight, which is one of his worst cards in the deck. He just has to leave it in because he doesn't have enough cards to board out. He's really just hoping this Elspeth goes all the way, but it's going to be tough. I mean, Floch's going to see like 10 more cards before he has to, actually do something between the Jaces and the Azorius charms.
Yep.
Yes, that does sound bleak for Owen, as we see Supreme Verdict come into hand for Even Floch.
So can he go Supreme Verdict and then activate Jace for its minus ability?
Looks like that's the plan, yeah. Though you do end up losing Jace to Mutavault if you do that.
Do you want the 2 land or do you want the Quicken? I'll have the Quicken because that draws me a card anyway.
The Quicken actually makes this plan a lot better because now Jace is safe from Mutavault. So Quicken is actually one of the better cards to turn over because now Owen just doesn't get a chance to sneak past Supreme Verdict. We'll see the same thing as last time.
If you lose 3 lands in one game to Quicken,
Yeah,
that's
rough.
gonna wake you up at least one middle of the night.
And Owen drawing another one of his bottom 5 cards in Banishing Light here.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, and
Right.
Jace, you.
he's not feeling excited. You could just hear it in his voice, but he doesn't really have much of a choice here.
Quicken to draw.
Yep.
Unbelievable. He's been making that card look terrific. Banishing Light takes out the Jace.
And let's start again with some more tokens. But Floch, again, look at that. 11 land in play now. Has a 12th ready to go. Up they come. You just got rid of a Jace? Okay, I'll have another one to trump your soldiers.
I like how he just puts 2 dice on it immediately.
And then Sphinx's
There's the rev.
Revelation.
Owen's got 1 turn to draw Thoughtseize and force Ivan into casting only a Revelation for 5. Otherwise, it's going to be a Revelation for 10 or 11, and that's going to be a lot harder to come back from.
Tough spot for the former player of the year, Owen Turtenwald. There's Even Floch. Lays that next land. What can Owen find?
It's like quicksand. The more you struggle.
Yeah, it's just a land
Two
there.
Jace, 1 at 2.
Two at Jace to try and kill it off. And one heading your way.
Do you Azorius Charm one of the two coming at Jace? Keep Jace alive?
I think that's actually pretty reasonable. I mean, you basically casting Azorius Charm as a Jace with 1 loyalty, which isn't super exciting, but at least keeps the Elspeth somewhat contained. Though Elspeth's getting close to ultimate. Once Elspeth ultimate, the Jace -1 ability or +1 ability doesn't really do much. So it is looking like we're heading for, Floch in a best-of-5 match. So the good thing is he plays very quickly.
He does.
And the way you can tell that is he does not have a ton of draws during
But
the
I hadn't
Swiss.
put it in that context yet, and may need to take a break in between the
Yeah.
semis and the finals.
Floch feeling pretty good. He has to be worried also if he casts Azorius Charm here, he really opens himself up to getting his Revelation Thoughtseized and not being able to draw cards off it. So I think the safer play, even though it's good to cast Azorius Charm and save Jace, I think the slightly safer play is just to do nothing and Rev for 4 or 5 in the worst case scenario, which is Owen having Duress. If Owen doesn't have a Duress, you're just so likely to win this game that there's no reason to risk it over a Jace.
Yep.
And we've seen over and over that he's just super patient. He never pulls the trigger unless he really has to. Although then again, that planar cleansing moment was pretty swift.
Even technically doesn't have a way to stop Elspeth from going ultimate. Not that that's actually, just going to end the game right now, but it is something to be concerned about.
We're just going to dig through 3 Azorius Charms here.
Lifelink, lifelink, lifelink. All right.
No, not what happened there.
No, most certainly not.
So Quicken goes to hand, and yes, we didn't expect that to be a massive deal this weekend. But as you say, BDM, he's really making Quicken look very, very good.
And Owen now,
Will Owen ultimate here?
he puts even in the in the position to have to do something. Though, even's at 16. If Owen ultimated, he would attack for 18, and even would be able to rev out of range. So you lose your Elspeth there, and you don't have a source to make tokens in case of a Wrath. I don't know if ultimating does exactly what you need it to do. The problem is if you don't ultimate, even doesn't even have to cast Rev this turn. He can just do something else instead. So
He does go ultimate.
So
Gets
right
an
now,
emblem.
So right now, we're lethal.
yeah,
3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18.
and looks like Quicken may continue to wipe the board since Quicken Supreme Verdict can let even cast an even bigger Sphinx's Revelation here.
There's Quicken.
Throws a redundant Supreme Verdict.
Yeah.
And now Owen has an Elspeth emblem with nothing to go with it, and even in the best position possible,
my
playing your
gosh.
15th land or whatever, and passing with Revelation in hand.
Only 14th.
And Packrat, despite how good it is just not going to match up well against this. Even's going to draw so many cards right now. He's going to draw 11 cards and then be able to cast a
11.
Supreme Verdict on his turn.
I like everyone was like 11, which sounded like translated to English is "Do you concede?"
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Marvelous. Or marvelously disgusting.
Yes.
There we are. We're in agreement.
And Planar Cleansing even has the additional bonus right now of giving even a Jace off that Banishing Light.
Oh
so.
my gosh.
Just let me look at my 15-card sideboard. Oh, wait, that's my hand.
And that's what he's gonna do. He's gonna planar cleansing, and then he's gonna draw 2 more cards.
Yeah, he doesn't have to discard enough
Oh,
yet,
he doesn't.
so-
He doesn't.
Up one.
Oh, he's decided to use Jace as his win condition.
Yeah, and also this way he doesn't, again, doesn't have to discard too many cards. He already has to discard a bunch, but he's just get to keep, Last Breath, basically no targets now that Elspeth emblem is around.
One more needs to go. It was a land. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Owen, I don't believe can win this game with, under normal means. Something very extraordinary would have to happen.
Right. Well, even the business, this is referred to as a sucking chest wound.
Yes.
Syncopate your Elspeth Son's champion. Go away.
Go.
Owen has to pass.
the rub-in divinations here. I mean, you still want to hit your land drop, so
Oh, and there's the Sphinx's Robe. I mean, the problem, he's so many lands out of his deck
yeah.
at this point.
Well, he's getting very close to actually going infinite, where you can rev an elixir every turn and just every turn, do something.
11.
And now,
I have it at 14. Did you take damage somewhere?
looks like a slight irrelevant life total discrepancy.
You say 11. I had you at 112.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
By the way, people playing in FNM, top tip, you're allowed to concede. Very good friend of mine playing a deck, a bit like Floch's in FNM. Took about half an hour of the first game to win. Opponent went to concede, went, wait, come back, friend. And then the guy sat down and played some more of game one until he actually killed him. As we see, Supreme Verdict. Yeah, you can...
if you're the type of person who plays this deck, you really want to keep playing.
yeah.
You want to see how many times you can cycle
There's
through your
the
deck. There's the
handshake.
hand flow. Yes.
There you have it. Owen Turtenwald is gone. Even Floch of the Slovak Republic. He has claimed his country's captaincy, as has Owen Turtenwald. You could see the two of them battling out for the World Magic Cup come December. But right now, Even Floch advances to the Pro Tour Magic 2015 final. Congratulations to him. Well, there we go, boys and girls. It was all about card draw, and it turns out that there's one card on that side that draws cards, and there's all the cards on this side that draws cards. And that was pretty much what happened.
And possibly the most significant card draw spell in Even Floch's deck was Quicken.
Yeah, Quicken did a lot of work that match.
He destroyed so many lands with Quicken. It was kind of amazing.
Yep. It was like, well, you've got all Mutavaults, that's lovely for you, but it turns out I'm going to reach out on your turn.
That deck has so many of my favorite do-nothing cards.
Yeah.
I really do love it.
I mean, like an actual quarter of the deck is just cards that draw cards.
So would you go as far as to say it was a rout, that match?
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, Owen certainly showed, a dominating performance in Game 2.
Yeah, games 1 and 2 were very close. Game 3 was close until that one Supreme Verdict was when the tide turned.
Okay, so the players are done. That means there is a space waiting for Jackson Cunningham and Pierre Mondon. We'll be back very soon with that semi-final. But why don't we head it back to the news desk and Marshall Sutcliffe?
Hey guys, welcome back to the news desk here at the PT. Marshall Sutcliffe. I've got Zach Hill with me, and pretty decisive. What do you make of that last match?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Z about it. I mean, Owen's deck was doing what it needed to do, get Underworld connections in early, start drawing cards, but planar cleansing was an absolute blowout. Those instant speed wraths were absolute blowouts. They mean that even Owen's trump cards aren't trump cards. So Floch did what he needed to win, and he's advancing to the finals.
You surprised?
I can't say that I am. I think that the blue-white control deck was very well positioned in that matchup. I think a thing that's awkward is the black-white deck doesn't actually have enough cards to side out like it wants, so it has to keep in some number of Bile Blights, which can do stuff against Mutavault, can do stuff against Elspeth tokens, but is essentially a blank card. Only one Sin Collector in the board, so it's not as though it's a bad or unwinnable matchup, but definitely I felt that Floch was favored, and that's exactly what happened.
Okay, why don't we take a look at our bigger picture here. We've gone through a decent amount of the tournament now. In the semifinals, we have our first finalist, Ivan Floch. He moves into the finals bracket and awaits his competitor. We are going to be finding that out very shortly here as the players are going to be moved over into the feature match area and seated Pierre Mondon from the United States. He's an Ohio area player, correct?
Yeah, a longtime Ohio area player, has a GP win, a couple other GP top 8s, and this is the first big finish on the Sunday stage. Really awesome deck that he brought to the table. A Jund Planeswalker's deck with 4 main deck copies of Read the Bones. Very, pretty rogue choice, but it served him well this weekend.
You take a look at Pierre there as he gets set to go. He's played in 7 Pro Tours now and already banked to top 8, not too bad. He's somebody who has played Magic for quite a while, though. He's got 33 lifetime pro points. That's usually indicative of somebody who's been around.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, none of the big, necessarily high-profile finishes beyond those Grand Prix top 8s, but that means he's finished, relatively high up in the field, still on the rise, and this is going to really catapult his career.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big congrats to him for even making it this far, but he's got a little ways to go here. If he wants to be our champion, he is going to be up against Jackson Cunningham from Canada. He's from Vancouver. Of course, we don't want to put too big of a label on him, but he is a very famous Magic player's younger brother. He's Jeff Cunningham's younger brother.
Yeah, and I mean, we had Jeff here. I guess he was talking to you, talking about
I chatted with him over on the Easy Chairs.
Yeah, and I mean, so Jackson, first event, first Pro Tour, one event, one top 8. It's pretty incredible, but with a pedigree of somebody like Jeff's backing you up, teaching you how to prepare, and crucially, I think, acclimating you to what it's like to play on Sunday. I'm wondering if, Jackson's nerves are going to be, a lot more calm than somebody else in his positions might be.
Yeah, I learned a lot from that chat with Jeff about how they went about it. They were very regimented. They know each other incredibly well, being brothers, and that means that they can cut out a lot of the overhead, right? They just know exactly how to communicate with each other in the most efficient way, and they were spreadsheets and data analysis, and they were really going deep on this thing. Additionally, Jeff was pushing Jackson. Jackson said, "My goal's to day 2. It's my first PT. It's like he's got to get used to the new environment. It's a big thing. It's like you got to kind of acclimatize yourself to what's going on." And Jeff said, "No." He's like, "That's not good enough." He's like, "We're aiming higher than that." And
really?
Yes, and they have made it. In fact, all the way here to the semifinals. Jackson playing for a spot in the finals. Why don't we take a look at the matchup from a deck list perspective here, Zach? Let's look at Pierre's deck. He is playing the Jund Planeswalkers list. Now, Yuki Ichikawa was playing a Jund Planeswalkers list, but this one's a little different.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we see Yuki had 4 copies of Elvish Mystic. I believe Montan only has 3, but the big difference is that Ichikawa had 4 copies of Nissa the World Waker. Mana does not have any of those. In his place, like I was talking about, he has 4 copies of Read the Bones and 2 main deck Rakdos Return. Now, what that means is his deck is positioned extremely well against mid-range and control decks, does not have as much weaponry against aggro, and that's exactly what he's up against. But, that being said, he's still got the package of Sylvan Caryatid and Courser of Krufix that we saw dominate Pro Tour Journey into Nyx. So if he's able to keep those cards on the battlefield, it's quite a potent weapon against aggro decks as well.
Yeah, this is an interesting list, not one that we've seen a whole lot of yet. This is a relatively newcomer to the standard scene. We've seen Jund Monsters for quite a while, but this is a little bit of a different take. This sort of reminds me almost of we used to call them the Super Friends list, but these friends are a little more sinister than the old ones.
Well, and what they all do quite well, though, is get around Lifebane Zombie. One of the reasons we saw a move away from cards like Pelucranos, cards like Reaper of the Wilds, is that those get hit with Lifebane. They sit in your hand and Lifebane all over the place because the mid-range black decks. So kind of an interesting metagame move, an interesting read of the environment, paid off really well for Mondan today.
Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Jackson Cunningham's list. It's a lot different. It's much cleaner, much simpler. It's an aggressive green-white build. Talk to us about this list.
I mean, basically this deck tries to kill you as quick as possible while offering enough resilience to survive into the mid-game. See an amazing, powerful curve. Experiment 1, Sunblade Elf, Soldier of the Pantheon. At the 2, you've got Voice of Resurgence, Fleecemane Lion, 3, Boon Satyr, Smiter. I'm going up the curve because that's what this deck does. Basically just tries to put a threat on the battlefield every turn from turn 1 to 4, push it over the edge with a card like a Johnny or Boon Satyr. Banishing Light is a removal. Amazingly straightforward deck, but very resilient. I really like this choice for the tournament.
This is going to be an interesting one to watch, both from a deck perspective, how this matchup plays out, but also from the player's perspective. Both of their first Pro Tour top 8s, I saw both of them when I was walking out in between rounds there, and they looked nervous. I went up to Pierre and I said, "Hey, Pierre, how you feeling?" or whatever. He said, "I'm pretty nervous." So I think that once they get the jitters out, I think we're going to see some really hard-hitting Magic being played. But it might take a little while for these players to sort of adjust to the whole. I mean, the stage, the lights. They know everybody's watching. It can really affect you.
Well, I mean, yeah, and even stuff like hearing the roar of the crowd. I mean, there's a packed room full of people watching you play, and of course, thousands of players around the world. That's not an easy pill to swallow. So
No.
I think, you're absolutely right. We're going to see the matchup with the Magic cards, and then we're going to see the matchup of the players. And I really do feel like the player who's able to best hold it together is going to have a significant edge in this match, where even one mistake could cost the entire possibility of the title.
Yeah, especially if you're looking at it from like Jackson Cunningham's perspective, where he's playing an aggressive deck, and aggressive decks are very skill intensive, and they're very demanding in the sense that they punish mistakes harder than most other decks, and that's going to be a big issue if Jackson, can get those nerves kind of worked out. One thing that we see a lot from players in this situation is they say, "I just want to start playing." Right? They're just like, just get me in there, and once the magic cards start being put down, I'll get into my groove, I'll be in my element, and I won't think about this other stuff. It's when they're sitting there, out in the feature match area watching other people play or thinking about the things that are going through their head, that's when it really can kind of get at them.
Well, another thing that can be just torturous is when you see the opponents that you're playing against, and they've got an entire team deconstructing how sideboarding works. They're all sitting around, they're all discussing every play. If you're not from one of these super teams, basically what's happening is you are trying to figure out with maybe a buddy or two of yours, maybe you're in the crowd trying to get your mind off what's going on, but you're confronted with the difference between these really established long-time teams and your sort of up-and-comer rising stardom.
Yeah.
That can be intimidating. On the other hand, it can be a pretty big David and Goliath moment for you to say, look, like, I don't need all this, I don't need this infrastructure around me. I'm good. I know my deck. I'm going to take down the title.
Yeah. All right. Looks like we're ready to head down to the feature match area right now for the second semifinal match here from Pro Tour Magic 2015. Let's send it over to the booth where Luis Scott Vargas, Brian David Marshall, and our own Rich Hagan await.